Can one moment change the world forever? Not over centuries, not after generations. One moment, one decision, one act of anger. Ancient China believed it already happened. Look around you. The rivers flow toward the sea. The mountains stand where they have always stood. The sky stretches quietly above us. It feels permanent, as if the world has always been this way. But what if it hasn't? What if the world was never supposed to look like this? What if the sky is still leaning because of something that happened thousands of years ago? Ancient China told a story unlike almost any other civilization. It wasn't a story about how the world was created. It was a story about how the world broke, not through war, not through disaster, not through the wrath of heaven, but because one being lost control. His name was Gong Gong. Some called him a god. Some remembered him as a ruler. Others believed he was nothing more than the memory of an ancient flood. But almost every version agreed on one thing. He became so consumed by rage that he charged straight into Mount Buzhou, the great mountain believed to support the heavens. The mountain shattered. The sky cracked. The earth itself shifted. From that day forward, heaven leaned toward the northwest. The earth sank toward the southeast. The sun, the moon, the stars, all began moving across the sky in a new way, and every river flowed toward the southeast. Ancient people looked at the world around them and believed they were living inside the consequences of someone else's anger. But here's where the story becomes even stranger. The oldest versions don't even agree on who Gong Gong really was. Was he a monster? A failed ruler? A rebellious god? Or something far more human? Because the deeper we search through ancient Chinese texts, the less certain the answers become. And perhaps that uncertainty is exactly what has kept this myth alive for more than 2,000 years. But who was Gong Gong? That question has puzzled historians for centuries, because the further back we trace the story, the less it resembles the version most people know today. Modern retellings often describe Gong Gong as an angry water god. He loses a battle. In rage, he slams his head into Mount Buzhou. The mountain breaks, the sky collapses. But the earliest Chinese texts tell a more complicated story. Some never even mention the mountain. Some never describe the collision. Others disagree about who Gong Gong was altogether. In one tradition, he appears as a powerful tribal leader. In another, a rival defeated in a struggle for power. Elsewhere, he is remembered as a divine being closely connected to floods and untamed rivers. The details change, but one idea never disappears. Chaos follows his defeat. Centuries later, different generations added new pieces to the story. The broken mountain, the tilted heavens, the rivers flowing southeast, even the movement of the sun and stars. These weren't random inventions. Ancient people looked at the world around them and searched for an explanation. Why do rivers all seem to flow in one direction? Why does the sky feel endless, yet somehow imperfect? Their answer wasn't science, it was myth. A myth that transformed the landscape itself into the memory of a single catastrophe. Whether Gong Gong truly broke the mountain was never the only question. The deeper question was this: why did generations of people believe that one act could leave a mark on the entire world? And that question is where the legend truly begins. So what actually happened? The most influential version comes from an ancient text called the Huinanzi. It describes a world on the edge of collapse. Gong Gong had been defeated. Unable to accept his loss, he hurled himself into Mount Buzhou, the great pillar believed to support the heavens. The impact was catastrophic. The mountain cracked. The sky tore open. The four corners of heaven could no longer stand. The earth itself shifted. Ancient Chinese texts say that from that day on, heaven leaned toward the northwest. That is why the sun, the moon, and the stars travel across the sky. The earth sank toward the southeast. That is why rivers flow toward the eastern seas. To ancient people, this wasn't simply a legend. It explained the world they saw every day, but the catastrophe didn't end there. With the sky broken, great fires burned without stopping. Floods swallowed the land. Wild beasts attacked villages. Chaos spread across the world. It was only then that another figure entered the story, Nuwa. She melted 5 colored stones to repair the broken sky. She cut off the legs of a giant turtle to restore the pillars of heaven. She defeated the black dragon. She stopped the endless floods. Together, Gong Gong and Nuwa tell one complete story. One broke the world, the other chose to repair it. And perhaps that contrast is exactly why these two legends have survived together for more than 2,000 years. But even then, the story still leaves us with one final question. Was Gong Gong simply a villain? Or was he meant to represent something much greater? But perhaps we've been asking the wrong question all along. For centuries, people have argued about whether Gong Gong was a god, a ruler, or a monster. But the myth was never really trying to answer that. It was trying to answer something else. What happens when anger becomes stronger than wisdom? Every civilization has stories about destruction. But ancient China imagined something different. It imagined that one moment of rage could permanently reshape the world. Not just one life, not one family, the entire world. Perhaps Gong Gong isn't simply a character. Perhaps he is every decision we make when emotion overcomes reason. Because most of us will never break a mountain. But almost everyone has said something, done something, or walked away from someone in a single moment of anger. And sometimes those moments cannot be undone. The mountain can never be whole again. The sky still carries its scars. The rivers never change their course back. That is what makes this myth feel surprisingly modern. It reminds us that consequences often outlive emotions. Our anger fades, but the things it leaves behind can remain for years, or even generations. Perhaps that is why Gong Gong's story has survived for more than 2,000 years. Not because ancient people believed a mountain held up the sky, but because everyone understands how one moment can change everything. So perhaps the legend has been asking us the same question all along. Before you act in anger, ask yourself one thing. If this single moment could reshape your world forever, would you still make the same choice?